Jan Franks is the manager of one location of the Save Some Inc. chain. Frank's location is currently earning a return on investment of 15% on existing average capital of $800,000. The minimum required return for Save Some Inc. is 12%. Frank is considering several additional investment projects which are independent of existing operations and are independent of each other. The following table lists the projects. So we've got project A through E and various required capital for each project and the return on investment for each of these projects. Okay, fair enough. So instructions say, which of the above projects would Frank choose for investment if his objective were to maximize his location's ROI? Well, he wants to make sure that his overall ROI is at least 15%, you would think. Certainly you don't want that to go down. And so basically any project which is at or above 15% would either neutralize or maximize, depending on how you look at it, his 15% ROI. Certainly, and if you look at the projects, Project A, which has an ROI of 16.2%, would increase overall ROI. And that's about it, really. I mean, I guess you could do B because it's not going to change anything. But if you're looking to maximize, probably the only one you want to consider would be A. B, which projects increase the value of Save Some Inc.? And so here what you have is a minimum ROI, required ROI that, or a minimum required return that Save Some has established, and that is 12%. And so anything that's above the minimum required return established by Save Some is going to increase the value of Save Some. And so that would include, so here in A, the answer is Project A, which is 16.2% ROI. Well, here in B, it's anything where ROI is above 12%, and looking at them, that is Project A, which is 16.2%, Project B, which is 15%, Project C, which is 14%, and D, which is 13%. You wouldn't want to do E because that's a 10% return, and that's below our minimum required return of 12%. Okay, so easy enough, right? Moving to C. Here, what we're looking for is finding out which projects have a negative residual income. Well, since we know what our threshold is, 12%, essentially anything that's above that's going to have a positive residual income. The only one that's not is going to be E, has a negative residual income. And I say that because it's really easy to eyeball, because if your minimum return is 12 and the actual return is 10, you're going to have a negative residual income. In running the numbers for that, let's just show that. So if ROI is 10%, and your investment is $600,000, your required capital what is return on income in actual dollars? Well, it's 10% times 600,000, which equals $60,000. See how I did that? ROI of 10%, you multiply that by your capital invested in a project. Here it's 600,000. You multiply 10% into the capital for this project, and you're going to come up with ROI in dollar terms of $60,000. So how much would be needed, or what kind of ROI would you need for a minimum return of $12,000, or excuse me, 12%? Well, that would simply be the following. It would be, so minimum required return in dollars is 12% times the amount of capital invested in this project. So that's 72,000. And of course, your return at 10% is 60, so 60,000 minus the ROI that's needed on this invested capital of 600,000 would be 72. And so you have a negative residual income of $12,000. Okay, so you take the actual ROI on this project and multiply it percentage-wise, and multiply it by the capital that you'd have invested in the project to come up with the dollar ROI. You take your minimum percentage, required return percentage, and multiply it by the capital invested in this project to come up with ROI, the minimum return, required return in dollar amounts, which is 72,000, and then you subtract the ROI actual from the ROI minimum required return to come up with your negative residual income. But you kind of can tell just simply from the dollar, or excuse me, the percentages. If the percentage of return for a project is below the minimum required return, you're always going to have a negative residual income. To figure out the dollar amount of the negative residual income, this is the formula. Okay, so that's C. D. So I made a little worksheet here, and it says create 2 rankings for the projects in the order of acceptability if rank is evaluated, number 1 on ROI, and 2 on residual income. So that's kind of what we've done here. And so for ROI, which is synonymous with operating income, you've got, what you do is you're going to take the required capital, so for A, 200,000, and you're going to multiply it by the ROI of 16.2%. Well, I can tell you, just from the ROI standpoint, just look at the ROI percentages in the book, Project A through E, and this is kind of a no-brainer. The higher the ROI, the higher up the rank it's going to be if you're ordering these. So, I mean, they kind of have already ranked ROI for these projects, because Project A is number 1 with 16.2% ROI, B is 15%, C is 14%, D is 13%, and E is 10%. So they are in order. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, E is 5. So kind of a no-brainer. But if you want to run it as far as operating income is concerned, you're simply going to take 200,000 times 16.2%. That's going to be 0.162 on your calculators, which is going to equal, from a dollar standpoint, 32,400. Now notice what's going to happen here. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me just run through the numbers, and then I'll talk about what I'm about to talk about. All right. So let's just run through the numbers. B is 400,000, and we multiply that by the 15%. I'll just put it right there, 0.15 equals 60,000. C, 300,000 times 14% is 42,000. 200,000 times 13% equals 26,000, and then 600,000 times 10% equals 60,000. So notice what you should do and what you shouldn't do. You should not base your ranking on the amount of income that you expect to produce, operating income that you expect to produce from a particular project, because there's two parts to this. There's the ROI, but there's also the amount of invested capital in the project. I mean, the higher the invested capital, the higher your ROI is going to be, or operating income is going to be. So you really have to concentrate on this ROI, and the higher the ROI, the better the acceptance of the project, not on this number over here, because by these numbers, project B and E certainly would be the more acceptable. But the reason why that's true is because why their operating income is so high is because you're having to invest so much capital in them. Look, you've got, for instance, A, you're investing capital of $200,000 at ROI of 16.2%. You're getting a return or an operating income of $32,400. Here, in E, you're having to invest 3 times the assets as in A. But yet, you're not even producing twice as much operating income. You're producing less than half or twice as much operating income on invested assets of 3 times as much. So that's not good. So you've got to look at the ROI of each one of these projects, not the sheer raw numbers of the operating income. Okay? Now, from a residual income standpoint, here we're going to take our operating income, which we've calculated over here, and we're simply going to transfer it over here as our starting point. Okay. Because what we're going to do is subtract this from this number, the invested capital, well, the sum of the invested capital of each project times the minimum required return. Okay, so here that number is going to be 200,000 times our minimum required return of at least 12%. And so 32,400. Here we have 24,000. So 32,400 minus 24,000 equals 8,400. Okay? So we do that for each one. Next, we take our 400,000 and divide and multiply it by the 12%. So 60,000 minus 48,000 equals 12,000. And here 300,000 times 12% is 36,000. So that's going to equal 6,000. And 200,000 times 12 is 24,000 equals 2,000. And E is 600 times 12 is 72, and as we've already seen, 60,000 minus 72 is a negative 12,000. So we already figured that one out in C. So, from a residual income standpoint, how would you rank these? Well, you would rank them in the amount of residual income. In other words, the larger the residual income, the higher up they are on your ranking. So here, 12,000 is the highest of them all. So that's ranked number 1. 8,400 is the second highest, so we'll rank that number 2. C, 6,000 is third highest, and D is fourth highest. And 5 is, or excuse me, E would be, of course, the 5th ranking, but because it has negative residual income, we would not accept this project at all, okay? But if you had your druthers, you would select project B before any of the others, and then go down the list accordingly. Okay, so that's D. E, I think it's kind of a discussion question. What are the components of ROI? Explain how the combination of components is useful in evaluating the success of business processes within a firm. It's pretty much take it out of the book sort of explanation type of question. So I think I'll leave that one to you. So anyway, your assignment is problem 25.5A.